we're really behind in this conversation. I mean, nobody else is ignoring us. Japan is not ignoring it, the US is not ignoring it. We see, even in Brazil, a lot of movement on official levels, and Europe is kind of fast asleep on this.
Those skeptics who are here in Czech Republic, they will even tell, yeah, the hearings in the USA, no, those are all nonsense, and so on, you know. They're very stubborn.
It's funny how there is this intense conviction that it's all nonsense.
Hello everyone. In the recent months, we've seen a lot of talk about UAPs in America. But what about Europe? Aren't we in this issue quite a bit behind? Can we do something about it? Well, there are actually quite a few people who are trying hard to move this issue forward in the European context. One of them is my guest. His name is Georg Boch, and he is facilitating a European UAP or NHI Disclosure Summit. It is coming very soon, and we'll tell you all you need to know about it. But for now, let me just welcome Georg. Hello, Georg. Can you hear me? How are you doing?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for joining me. And for the beginning, I would just like to ask you, how did you start your journey to this issue of UAP, NHI? How did you start with this issue?
Well, ever since I was a child, I was always extremely fascinated with, the stars in Star Trek and science fiction, especially serious science fiction, 2001 Space Odyssey, but it was always at this, level of science fiction, and it never really became real. And during my career in media and when I studied documentary film, the idea of UFOs was always very stigmatized and never took it serious because the field always felt so funny and so cheesy. And this idea of this little gray and these tall white people, it always seemed like a B movie, and I didn't want my universe to be a B movie. And so I always kept it pretty far away. But then my entry point was actually when I learned more about electromagnetism and parts of electromagnetism that were just left out, and kind of the weight of evidence that part of what we call science has been redacted for reasons that are not very apparent. The weight of evidence was overwhelming. And this came together with the opportunity we had at Ubiquity University, where I work, to collaborate with New Paradigm Institute in 2023 to launch the first degree program in ET studies, where in the wake of this legislation that was then gutted, but to some extent was put into place, we had the opportunity to create various courses on the history of this suppression, and to try to understand in an academically sound manner what are the facts that we do know about the phenomenon over the last 80 years. And this was aided by people like Danny Sheehan and Richard Dolan. And so that's what we did in 2023, 24, mostly 24. And so this is how Ubiquity University kind of came into this rabbit hole of UAP disclosure. And I learned a lot about the wonderful people working in this field. And I know a lot of people in the US, but Europe was always the place where I live. I live in Berlin. And it seemed kind of like a due diligence to at some point also connect the dots in Europe about what's actually going on here. And I heard about people like Beatrice, Viore, and Andrea Lani, who are Europeans and active in this field. And I just said at some point, man, we need to get these people together and understand what's actually happening in Europe, because as you already said, the ball is moving pretty quickly in the US, at least in the circle of the people who are in the know, in the limited conversation. I mean, it's not mainstream media conversation we're talking about here. A certain, I would say, almost elite field of interest who is following this subject at the avant-garde of science, a certain avant-garde of politics. And this is not happening in Europe yet. it there were inklings of it by Francisco Guerrero 2024 in March, where there was this first UAP hearing at the European Parliament, which was a very important step in the right direction. But the question is, where do we take it from here, right? What is kind of the suggestion that we as European UAP researchers and thought leaders, for better lack of the term, would make to the European countries, to the European Parliament, what to do about UAP disclosure and what narrative do you want to bring forward, and how could we even create maybe a framework that is superior to the way the US is handling the subject right now. So these are very big and open questions that we're not going to answer at the summit on June 15th. But I think it's important to get the conversation started and connect these people, and that's what we're trying to do.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is a bit sad that I, for instance, learned about Magenta case from David Grush. So how possible that I hear about European something that happened here from American perspective, and it a bit shows that the different European countries don't really communicate on this. So probably you've never heard any Czech UFO case. I
Exactly.
actually, yeah, I actually don't know anything about what's happening in Germany in this matter. I mean, I've heard about few people, but about some case, not really.
Yeah, I think you made a very important point about the lack of relevance in the national cultures in Europe
Hmm.
of this phenomenon. I mean, if you look at the US, we have the Roswell moment, and somehow this idea of ETs having crashed in the desert at that point, for whatever reason, it's kind of part of the cultural, you say, DNA of American pop culture. It never really went away. It's very present and it's ridiculed, but it is real to some extent, right? And in Europe, we don't really have these Roswell moments in each of the countries. I mean, is there like a Czech Roswell moment?
I don't know that if we have any crashed UFO, probably not. I heard some mentions that some crashed UFOs came during World War II, but I don't have any concrete
Right,
evidence or
right.
document. I mean, even in some documentaries in US, they mentioned
Mhm.
Czechoslovakia at that time. It was Czechoslovakia, right? But we had one big sighting, for instance, near a kind of South Bohemia, where there was kind of Tic Tac UFO who came from Austria, then flew over Czech Republic, and then it continued over Hungary, I believe. And then it disappeared to the sky or something. And it was even followed by a helicopter. There are official reports on it. Yeah, one of the Czech researcher really got well into it. And the good point was that he's a really big skeptic. So he really went into details and he couldn't explain it till today. So his name is Vladimír Šiška, but yeah, this is, I guess, one of the most famous Czech case.
Yeah, researching the summit, I mean, I learned so much about these different cases in Europe. All we kind of have is this Belgium wave. When was
Hmm.
it? End of 80s. This kind of one thing even in the US is known. Um, but apart from that, all this richness of sightings in each of the countries, like these jellyfish UAPs from the 50s in Portugal, the Fatima mass sightings over months, this French wave in the 50s, the 2014 French sightings over all the French nuclear power plants. That stuff I just learned researching this, connecting to the people in the different European countries. And that alone was an incredible journey just to get the people together to meet and to learn from each other. Because one of the big, I would say, advantages, but also challenges in Europe is that we are so we have so different and diverse cultures and complex histories. So even though we can speak in English to each other, it doesn't really capture the depth of how unique we each are in our countries. and how different we all relate to the subject. It was so interesting to learn how the French kind of intimacy with the physical sightings of the UAPs, but this very strong stigma and even state policing of people claiming to be starseeds or any spiritual association of people with the ET phenomenon. I mean, that's very much frowned upon with a stigma that's not common, at least here in Germany. So it's something I really learned how each of these countries have their own unique take on it. The same thing in Italy, with very rich history and, a bunch of cases that are difficult to just understand from our cultural vantage point. And I believe that this is the big challenge for this European UAP conversation, that are we able to find a common ground that makes this culturally relevant for all of Europe? In the sense that, in America, we have people like Joe Rogan that have a huge reach and he has guests there like Hal Puthoff or, David Grush, and reach millions of people and bring this subject up in the, I would say, public awareness. Even though it's not the mainstream awareness, it's very relevant. I mean, people argue that Joe Rogan's interview helped Trump win because it reached so many people. And we're kind of missing this type of alternative media with a lot of reach in Europe because there isn't really a transnational European, I would say, alternative media that would advocate for European strategy. And maybe my deepest hope is that what we're trying to do here with building these connections could be a first step towards building such a alliance.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and even in Czech Republic, that you mentioned different cultures having it, looking at it differently. I feel in Czech Republic we have a big division between that UFO subject is kind of viewed two ways, either pretty much like more esoterical view or super skeptical view, that those skeptics who are here in Czech Republic, they will even tell, yeah, the hearings in the USA, no, those are all nonsense and so on, that they're very like stubborn.
It's funny how there is this intense conviction that it's all nonsense. And I feel the same way here in Europe. It really doesn't quite matter who swears what under oath in front of Congress. If you have made up your mind that this is not real and nothing's there to see, then it basically doesn't matter what happens. It is very much a culture war to some extent.
And I'm just wondering, how are the discussion about UAP in Germany? Are there any or not really?
Yeah.
And do you have
Well, to be perfectly honest,
case?
I have not had the opportunity to learn too much about the European or the German field because I was so focused working with the US world on this. So this is also why I invited Robert Fleischer to the summit, who is very much a big voice here in Germany on the subject in the German-speaking world. So hopefully we will learn more his assessment on the subject. But I can tell you that even like in mainstream newspapers like the FAZ, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, which is one of the most important German newspapers, they have, sometimes little op-eds on these silly Americans and their absurd claims. And for example, there, David Grush was called a pilot, even though he was a senior intelligence analyst, and this happened a few weeks ago. So this gives you kind of a sense of how much due diligence and serious research was applied to writing this op-ed. And of course, it's very concerning when there are these fringe subjects that you know something about. I mean, it's not a big deal. Just look at the freaking biography of the person and see he was not a pilot. That's Ryan Graves. That's not David Grush, right? It's a big issue. Easy error to spot. And it shows you that if they pay this much attention to this subject, how much attention do they pay to other subjects that are need to be reported on? And so it kind of pulls away the curtain of the news apparatus, so to speak, and shows you that maybe the mainstream media doesn't actually know what they're doing or what they're saying, and either they're just not paying attention on purpose, or they're being coerced or intentionally downplay a subject to make it less credible for whatever reason. So that's kind of my stance on the German subject. It is late. We're really behind in this conversation, and this is kind of my main talking point, especially after the UAP fund event in DC this month, where there was the big scandal with the image by Lou Alexander. But this was really one of these psyop internet attacks, I believe, because let's talk about rather what was actually being discussed there that was beyond any reasonable doubt. And one of the most important things there, I found the input of Anna Estevez Brady Estevez, I believe it is. And she, worked for the American Deep Tech Innovation Fund, and also worked in conjunction with NASA and the Department of Energy on trying to bring out breakthrough technologies that were previously connected to aerospace. And she really made an incredible statement where she likened these UAP sightings and summonings as they're done by skywatchers a bit like to whale watching. Like if you know where to go and what to do, you will see the whales. It's like a natural phenomenon that we've known about since 80 years. And people in these breakthrough tech sectors, they take these UAPs as a proof of concept. So if this thing can break the current rules of physics, we can as well. We know it's working. We know it's possible. And so, as was stated already by one of the aides in the UAP summit at the European Parliament, Charles Maxen, who wrote this great paper on the strategic need for Europe to make a UAP task force. It's really not about wanting to come to any specific conclusion about the nature of NHI and who is here and what they want and where they're from. It's really not really important. It's important that we truly just get to business on researching this as the European nations in a united manner, and considering the renewed importance of a sovereign European strategy when it comes to security, given what's going on in this post-unipolar world, multipolar world, is really no excuse right now. It's criminal that the European politics is ignoring the subject. I mean, nobody else is ignoring this. Japan is not ignoring it. The US is not ignoring it. We see even in Brazil a lot of movement on official levels, and Europe is kind of fast asleep on this. I wonder if we're more busy trying to convince the UAPs to use a certain charging cable or to not throw anything down, the plastic taps.
Yeah.
So we're really good at regulating, but we're not going to regulate the UAPs, people.
I mean, in Europe, I think the most good work on the official and the maybe political field is doing maybe the Netherlands, European Netherlands
Yes.
Coalition, if you heard. I probably know, right? And I mean, I really like that they are trying to reach out in all the ways they can. And I remember that I translated one open letter to the European members, I guess. And there were even really nice and clear reasons why we should study the UAPs, and really rational ones.
That they're doing very important work, and I invited them to the summit as well. What worries me is maybe we're not taking this conversation fast enough to where it needs to go, in the sense that if we define UAP as kind of aerial phenomenon, we're in this endless conversation of, oh, maybe they're Russian drones, who
Mm, mm,
knows? Then it's really much more about just security of our airspace. And that's maybe a conversation starter for many people, but it's not this, it doesn't have the ultimate urgency that we need to have in order to really move the needle. And
mm,
the real urgency, I believe, is statements like David Grush's of the bodies have been recovered. Paul Puthoff, we have at least 20 crafts for back engineering. I mean, anybody in the European, I would say, can you say European security state? Is that a thing? Well, I'm just going to say it, right? Anybody in the
yeah.
European security state, there must be one. Maybe it's NATO, right? They know that this is happening in the US. I mean, the European
Mm,
hackathons
mm,
happening in
mm.
Silicon Valley, private enterprises like Skywatchers, AI, it's called aerial intelligence. There's a kind of a new field of, you could say, um, intelligence and security in conjunction with AI coming to life. And we know that the warfare is changing to drones. So this is kind of the zeitgeist of it. And it's important that we move beyond this idea that this is all a threat and this is all about getting better drone defense strategies. I think this is kind of what Europe can uniquely contribute to some extent. This perspective that this is not just about foreign adversaries all the time. This can be about something that's much bigger than that. And this is
Mm.
a conversation that not just the deep state should be invited to, should be a public and academic undertaking that allows for all perspectives to be involved.
Yeah, I mean, in the US, I feel that the serious conversation started thanks to Elizondo saying that it is a threat, kinda, and then the government had to take it seriously, or had a good reason to take it seriously. Maybe it kind of helped to start it, but it is not the ideal way, but maybe
Yeah, this is a very important
working.
question you're making there. It's a bit of what we will also address in the summit is what is the legitimating narrative to bring this to the forefront,
Mm,
right? Because to most people, the idea that we're not alone is not a legitimating narrative from their operating system in reality. It's kind of, yeah, nice to know, who cares?
mm, mm,
Unless you're an experiencer, right? Or have some kind of deep relationship to whatever is out there already. And so, yeah, the threat narrative, or the ambiguous threat narrative is, of course, one thing. And probably you're right, the political traction will only happen if we can satisfy several narratives at the same time. And this is, of
mm,
course, why this term UAP was invented, probably in the first place in the early 2000s, to take people on a political journey or on a just paradigm journey. And some of them are still deeply believing this is some Chinese drone or Russian drone, and others are utterly convinced that this is also an anomalous phenomena from unknown origin. And both of
mm.
them are happy to support the bill.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, it would be research based, not really like threat based, but I don't know who should like take this on in European Union.
Mm.
It seems that, I mean, there are some universities that care about it. I heard that in Würzburg there's some research. Of course, in
Hmm.
the northern countries, like we have Beatriz Villarroel and so on, these researchers. But it's kind of in their own field, small department. I feel like it is this way, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I've also contacted the professor in Würzburg at the Exoterrestric Institute, informed them about the summit. And from what I gather, they're very much about the nuts and bolts data gathering of
Hmm.
whatever is out there. And which is fine, which is fair. But the US conversation towards congressmen is about which species and how to implement this in the mainstream. If you read Carnell's recent white paper from the Sol Foundation, they're discussing political strategies to bring the private enterprise world on board and end 80 years of secrecy. So the political think tank kind of momentum is further ahead, and we kind of need to catch up on that. At least this European self-identified task force should get together, and I'm hoping that doing this on Zoom is kind of the first step to activate these dormant resources that we have here, which I believe are much more diverse and to some extent also multidimensional and interesting than this. To some extent, one could argue that the American ufology is kind of a monoculture. Like it's a certain way, and the European ufology is kind of a rare mountain flower with all kinds of appearances. Yeah.
And I was just wondering, I met you on Twitter, on X, and I saw on your page you wrote about inevitable triangularity of AGI, NHI disclosure, and ether physics. So I was wondering, what is this about? It sounded quite deep.
Yeah, well, this is my kind of take on what disclosure is about. So I don't see disclosure only as, oh, there have been 80 years of secrecy regarding these weird lights in the sky. It's also, oops, there's been 80 years of secrecy on what we actually know about physics and what we actually know about consciousness and how human consciousness can interact with a larger cosmos that we have known since many, many thousands of years. So there are all these subterranean underground streams of wisdom or classified information that are coming to the forefront right now in our culture for whatever reason, for those who are willing to listen to it and to connect the dots. And you can add ancient monolithic sites to the list, right? That doesn't make much sense. And well, it's people like David Grush or Matthew Brown. I think it's our generation, right, who feel that we've kind of reached a dead end with the current paradigm of seeing the world. And what we're trying to do here, for better or worse, is to first have this, I would say, take stock of human history and connecting the dots and say, oops, the current narrative is not really working out anymore for the civilization. And there are other civilizations knocking at the door saying, you guys, why you still want to blow each other up with atomic weapons? And why are you still driving around with fossil fuel cars? So this is kind of the big picture here of why I talk about this inevitable triangularity. It's just a funny coincidence, maybe, that these UAP sightings, like the few fighters over Europe, over Germany, were always these three dots, these three lights. Often these UAPs appear in these three dots, and so that's why I chose that term of the triple singularity. And AI is, of course, another subject, and this was the big point that people in this UAP tech sector, like Deep Prasad, who made this hackathon in April, and Anna Brady Estevez, they're making the same point, that we're at the threshold of these converging exponential technologies, such as AI, quantum computing connected to brain-computer interfaces, that we know now more about how the brain creates meaning by having analyzed large language models, better understanding how cognition and consciousness are kind of emerging or not emerging. There are people at the forefront of computing and quantum, classical computing and quantum computing, working with neuroscience, the scientists. The same people meet at the UAP meetup and talk about how we can use AI to re-engineer these metamaterial samples that were provided by Gary Nolan from Stanford. And so it's the genius emerging in the US right now, like the genius of a scene of cross-silo people who can finally understand each other's language, aided by AI as well. And that's really exciting to me. And so that's the largesse of this disclosure conversation that I want to include eventually.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I see all the new developments in AI, I'm not stopping being surprised. I mean, the Google what is that software, VEO free, or what is it called?
VEO3, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, oh my God, if we don't have a UAP disclosure within a year, maybe anybody could fake anything already, and how can we trust the videos and so on? But I mean, I guess you mean the AI connection through some AI analysis of the data of UAP and so on, right? To use it
Your
in
point
this
is
matter.
also very valid. We're rapidly approaching a tipping point where no video citing material would make a difference to anybody. And it's just, I really liked Richard Dolan's title for his talk at the Contact in the Desert, which is happening, I think, this weekend, May 30th, that in a way, this UAP disclosure is the ultimate end game in a post-truth world. Because we don't have like in the 60s, we could have just had a public announcement by the president on national TV and the thing would have been decided. And now in Europe and in the world, whatever the Trump White House makes is just not taken serious anyway. And so it's really impossible just to change a needle by making an announcement. So that's why I believe the facts will be made by technology and the origin of technology, whether it was our own or inspired by exo influence or not. The technology will make it clear that there are things flying in the sky all the time. Advanced sensing and so on and so forth will make these aerial recognition capabilities that are currently only available to certain military operations very, very easy to get. I mean, just imagine what OpenNHI is trying to do with this startup that Deep Prasad is working on that he disclosed at the hackathon in April. Basically, what they're trying to do is to enable teams like Skywatchers that summon UAP and gather data on UAP to pop up all over the world. So with open source technology and UAP data that's on chain, like Bitcoin, that's crypto encoded, so you can't really mess with the data so easily. So if you have a global network of UAP researchers that create their own kind of science on what's going on, it becomes kind of an overwhelming fact. So it's less top down and more bottom up.
I mean, I'm most excited about these factual findings that might happen in the near future, like in the Skywatcher, but also on your European UAP Disclosure Summit, you will have Dennis Asberg, and he should soon have another expedition to the Baltic Sea anomalies. So I'm very, very curious about this. So maybe you could describe what else are you optimistic about, maybe in the European perspective, or even including the speakers you will have. And maybe I'll just say that the European UAP or NHI Disclosure Summit 2025, you also named it Breaking Stigma, Building Strategy. It is happening on 15th of June.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what the best angle is and what to ask them right now, but definitely this Baltic Sea anomaly is up on my list to understand better. And What am I optimistic about? Well, it's really hard to say. I'm looking forward to the fact that there seems to be a Seoul symposium this year in Italy, which I find a happy coincidence. I didn't know that when I started this planning this conference. And I think there are more and more, events popping up, like what we're doing at Ubiquity University, where you can go on retreats for 5 days with people like Chris Bledsoe that have kind of an intimate psychophysical relationship to the phenomenon and have more of an energetic contact experience that is long lasting and connected to your personal transformation as well. So that's something hoping also to start in Europe soon, that we get people from all levels of engagement together and find kind of a common ground operating system that's zeroed out, and it enables us to move forward and stop discussing endlessly on if it's Russian drones or Ukrainian drones, or we just basically accept the fact.
Did you ever try CE5, or are you experiencer in some way?
It's really funny. I'm not an experiencer in the sense that I remember any specific events that happened to me. I do feel kind of an energetic contact reality that makes any sense. Right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my level of engagement.
It's fine. I mean, here in Czech Republic, I would say that our UFO community is quite a fan of CE5. This year we are doing 3 expeditions, so quite a bit, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Yeah, so if there will be some events like this, I'm also looking forward maybe we can stay in touch in this matter. And yeah, maybe could you just tell us a bit more about the summit that's coming up? Will be there a recording? I hope yes, right?
Absolutely. People can join live via Zoom and put their questions in the chat as well. That's the best way to join. And we're also trying to live stream on YouTube and so on and so forth. But if they want to receive the recording quickly and get updates on the next summits, then registering for Zoom on the website is the way to go.
Yeah. Okay. I'm personally very much looking forward to this. So maybe we can even schedule something after this to debate later on. And thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm definitely looking forward for this summit. And I wish you that all work well in the technical and even normal order. So
thank you for your support.
Yeah. So thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.